Our Island Story, Chapter 30. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Shallenberg. Our Island Story by H.E. Marshall, Chapter 30. Henry Plantagenet, the story of Gilbert and Rohesia. Henry II, as you know, got his name Plantagenet from his father, Geoffrey of Anjou, who used to wear a piece of Plantagenista in his helmet. He was the first of several kings ruling England who were all Plantagenets. Henry II was only 21 years old when he began to reign, and, like his grandfather, Henry Beauclerk, he reigned 35 years. Like him, too, he did much to draw the English and Norman people together. The misrule and confusion of the reign of Stephen had been so great that Henry had to work very hard to bring his kingdom into order again. He not only worked hard himself, but he made other people work too. It is said of him that he never sat down, but was on his feet all day long. The first thing Henry did was to send away all the foreign soldiers who had come to England to help Stephen and Matilda in their wars. Next he made the barons pull down their castles in which they used to do such dreadful deeds of cruelty. He told them they must live in ordinary houses, and not in fortresses which could be turned into fearful prisons and places of torture. The barons were very angry, but like his grandfather, Henry Beauclerk, Henry II was stern, and forced people to obey him. These are only a few of the things which he did, for the reign of Henry II was a great one. To help and advise him in his work, Henry chose a man called Thomas à Becket. Thomas à Becket's father was called Gilbert, and his mother Rohesia. Gilbert was a London merchant, and when he was young he had made a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, as was common in those days. At that time Jerusalem was in the hands of people called Saracens. They were pagans, and hated the Christians, and they treated very badly those who came to visit the sepulchre of Christ. While Gilbert was on his pilgrimage, a rich Saracen seized and put him in prison, saying he should not come out until he had paid a great sum of money. This Saracen had a beautiful daughter. Rohesia, for that was her name, had seen the handsome young Englishman before her father put him in prison, and she felt sorry for him. She used to come to the little window of his cell to speak to him, and to bring him things to eat and drink. Night after night she came, and they whispered to each other through the bars of the little prison window. There was no one to hear, and only the stars and the moon to keep watch. All day long Gilbert used to wait impatiently until night came, when Rohesia would creep quietly to the window, and he would hear her whisper, "Gilbert, Gilbert," and she would slip her little hand through the bars and touch his. Rohesia could speak no English, but Gilbert could speak her language, and he taught her to say his name. She learned to say London, too, and knew that that was where he lived. Gilbert and Rohesia grew to love each other very much, and all the day seemed long and dreary until night came and they could whisper to each other through the prison bars. But one night Rohesia came breathless and pale. "Gilbert," she whispered, "Gilbert, my father is asleep, and I have stolen the keys. I will unlock the door. You are free." Gilbert hardly believed the good news until he heard the key turn in the lock. Then the door swung open, and he knew that he was indeed free. He took Rohesia in his arms and kissed her, promising that he would never forget her. "As soon as I get back to England I shall send for you," he said. "You must come to me, and we shall be married and never part any more." Then Gilbert went away, and Rohesia was left all alone. She felt very sad after he had gone, but she comforted herself always by remembering that he was going to send for her, and that then they should be together and happy ever after. Gilbert arrived safely in England, but he forgot all about the beautiful Saracen maiden and his promise to her. He had so many things to do when he got back to London that the time for him went very quickly. But for Rohesia the time passed slowly, slowly. Day after day went. In the morning she said, "To-day he will send." In the evening she wept and said, "He has not sent." At last she could bear the waiting no longer, so she set out to try to find Gilbert. She knew only 2 words of English, but she was not afraid. She traveled all through the land until she reached the seashore. There she said, "London, London," to every one whom she met, until at last she found a ship that was going there. She had not much money, but she gave the captain some of her jewels, and he was kind to her, and landed her safely in London. London in those days was much smaller than it is now, but Rohesia had never seen so many houses and people before, and she was bewildered and frightened. Every one turned to stare at the lovely lady dressed in such strange and beautiful clothes, who kept calling, "Gilbert, Gilbert," as she passed from street to street. Gilbert was sitting in his house when suddenly he heard his name. He knew the voice, yet he could hardly believe his ears. Could it indeed be Rohesia? In a flash he remembered everything, the dark little prison, the lovely Saracen girl, his love for, his promise to her. He ran to the door and opened it quickly. The next minute Rohesia was sobbing in his arms. Her long journey was ended. She had found Gilbert. As Gilbert held Rohesia in his arms, he found all his old love for her had come back, so they were married and were happy. They had a little son whom they called Thomas. He grew up to be that Thomas à Becket, who was King Henry's great chancellor and friend. I must tell that some people say that this story of Gilbert and Rohesia is only a fairy tale. Perhaps it is. End of chapter 30. Read by Kara Shallenberg. www.kray.org. On June 19th, 2006, in Oceanside, California.